Good morning, or whatever time of day it happens to be where you are. My name is Argo Vermeer. This is my tagline is Collectivism Kills, and this channel is an addendum to my blog unreformingtheology.com. That is unreformingtheology.com, where we talk about lots of stuff, not just theology. I have lots of articles. So if you like this kind of thing in written form, you can find lots and lots of articles there. So back to You Don't Understand Individualism, which is the series we're doing now. We're talking, and I'm reading from an article I wrote on my blog a while ago, a couple years ago, called The Dissident Right Doesn't Understand Individualism, Exposing Ignorance of Orrin McIntyre. If you don't know who Orrin McIntyre is, it's fine. It's really not that relevant. He's a guy on the right who essentially blames the rise of leftism or neo-globalist communism on individualism. Now, anybody who points out the ideological evils of their perceived enemy as being a function of either collectivism or individualism, you need to find out whether or not they know what they're talking about. Anybody who blames the rise of communism, global neo-communism, on individualism doesn't know what individualism is. They don't know what collectivism is, therefore, which means they don't understand of the nature of the problem or the nature of the enemy they face, which means they aren't in a position to offer you any real solutions, and they won't. So anybody who asserts that a collectivist ideology is a function of individualism has no idea what they're talking about, hasn't even the foggiest idea of metaphysics, and is not in a position to be lecturing anybody on socio-political ills of any kind, and certainly shouldn't be offering any solutions. The idea that you get a collectivist effect from an individualist cause is a lie. Collectivism and individualism are rooted in entirely distinct and entirely mutually exclusive metaphysical premises and metaphysical primaries. And as I said in my last audio upload, my last video, like begets like. A fish does not give birth to a bird. A bird does not give birth to a frog. Collectivist metaphysics do not give rise to individualist thinking and vice versa. Collectivist metaphysics do not give rise to individualist ethics or epistemology and vice versa. Collectivism gives rise to collectivism. Individualism gives rise to individualism. This is because 2 + 2 is 4. It's not 5. I have said all along, the reason why America is not living up to its ideals, quote unquote, as we might define them, the proper constitutional ideas, is that America was the attempt to synthesize individualist ethics with collectivist metaphysics. America represents the supreme attempt to apply a contradiction to the socio-political arena. It isn't going to work. It wasn't going to work. It was a failed experiment because the premises failed. There is no such thing as a square circle. There is no such thing as up also being down at the same time from the same observational frame of reference. Black is not white, left is not right, and you do not promote individualist ethics and morality and individualist epistemology and thinking from collectivist metaphysics. Collectivism begets collectivism. Individualism begets individualism. So the idea that anyone, particularly a thought leader on the distant right, is going to make the assertion that the rise of leftist, neo-communist, globalist politics is a function of individualism has no idea what they're talking about and shouldn't be within 1,000 miles of of political power or political punditry, in my opinion. If you don't understand metaphysics, you aren't in a position to lead other men and women politically or philosophically speaking. Metaphysics are simply this: the assumptions we make about the nature of man and reality. Metaphysical primary is that from which all of reality is either a function or is implied. So if you don't understand who your real ideological enemy is, if you don't understand the metaphysics of your ideological enemy correctly, so that you can correctly deduce who is a collectivist and who isn't, then you aren't in a position to really understand the problem. All problems of all socio-political problems are a function of metaphysics, and all solutions will be a function of metaphysics. Improper assumptions about the nature of man and reality will lead to chaos. Proper assumptions about the nature of man and reality will lead to the promotion and prosperity of humanity. One leads to death, and one leads to life. So, the fact that governments exist based on specific assumptions about the nature of man and his reality, the fact that governments continue to rise and fall, to rise and then collapse in spectacularly violent fashion, should tell you basically the majority of what you need to know about the metaphysics of government. They are based on, and metaphysics are what? The assumptions about man and the nature of reality. Why do governments keep failing? Governments are a product of their metaphysical assumptions. Their metaphysical assumptions are false. And all governments are rooted in collectivist metaphysical assumptions. They don't work because collectivism is a lie. Individualism and individualist metaphysics is the truth. You will never get an iteration of individualism with a state as a function of government. The very fact that the dissident right proposes a different kind of government, or at the very least a different kind of politician within the apparatus of government, means they do not understand what real individualism. If they understood individualism, they would understand that real individualism would never imply the existence of a state, of a government. And neo-communist globalism is perhaps the purest, most rarefied version of collectivist metaphysics ever. The idea that this comes from individualism is, I'm apoplectic. It's ridiculous to a degree. It's as ridiculous as saying a fish is going to give birth to a bird. A snake is going to give birth to a whale. That's the level of silliness, the idea that you're going to get globalist communism from individualist metaphysics, which specifically reject the existence of a state of government. Is completely ludicrous. So we're going to continue with this today. This is part 4 of You Don't Understand Individualism. And when I say you, I mean me too. As I said in my last video, I won't rehash it, but I was a complete idiot in my younger years. Actually, I won't even say younger years. Up until about 10 years ago, I was a card-carrying, flag-waving conservative, blinded like the best of them. And I don't even like looking at pictures of myself back then because I cringe to think of how foolish I was. I don't want to say a fool, that's a little harsh. I always gave a little bit of a side eye to Christian doctrine because I realized even very, very young, I mean, I don't want to say, not when I was like 8, but, I want to, like young adult, I realized that there was some admixture of relatively thick cognitive dissonance in the doctrine. And I do know evangelizing the faith back in the day was always something that was a little bit terrifying. And it wasn't, a lot of people don't like confrontation. A lot of people aren't good in front of crowds. A lot of people don't like conflict. A lot of people don't like door-to-door selling, which is a little bit what evangelizing feels like. You're trying to sell your ideology to people. But the root of why it was so uncomfortable was because, and this is something I didn't realize later, I realized there was something very uncomfortable about the idea of evangelizing my Christian faith. But I didn't realize until later it was because we didn't really know what the hell we believed. It was blind faith. It was sort of all rooted in some kind of doctrinal. It was rooted in essentially at the root of all Christian evangelism was this cognitive dissonance of God's mystery. We really didn't have answers. It was blind faith. Well, you just got to believe because you got to believe. God is God because God's God. It was very tautological. It was very circular. And now, I'm still a Christian. I'm not a member of any church because I guess how I define God and man, while I would consider them to be absolutely biblical, tend to not correspond with the doctrine of most churches, or at least not the churches around here, in which case I would be considered a heretic, and so they wouldn't have me anyway, even though I consider their doctrine to be heretical, because their doctrine is a function of basically all of Orthodox Christianity is a product of the synthesis of Christianity with the state. So all of the formal doctrine and all the creeds and all this kind of stuff that sort of inform the church writ large are a product of the church being synthesized with the state, with Rome. And my opinion or my idea or my assertion is that Christian doctrine is an admixture of Gnostic metaphysics with Christian ethics and therefore represents a false doctrine. That's not me saying that all Christians are going to hell and they're not good people and that their faith is all wrong and they believe in a false God and all that. I'm not saying that at all. But I believe the doctrine is impure. And I believe it can lead them to have certain assumptions about themselves and God which hinder their walk and don't help it. I'm not condemning them. I'm not saying Christians are all bad people. I'm not saying the whole church is wrong and they're all going to hell and I'm the only right one. I'm not saying that. I am not a cult leader. I'm not a thought leader. I'm a guy that has a doctrine and some ideas, and I submit that they are rational. That's all. I am perfectly willing to concede that Christians are fine people, and that I would argue that most Christians act and walk in spite, relatively speaking, of what they say they believe. Because, see, if Christians actually walked out what they said they really believed, then they would be absolute nihilists. And then they would be going to hell. They would have absolutely no faith in themselves or anybody else and would cease to have a reason to live. And I won't go into big detail about that. That's a whole other video. But my point being is that if they actually lived and acted according to their fundamental doctrine and the fundamental implied metaphysics, the assumptions they make about man and God and reality, there'd be no point in getting out of bed in the morning, and they wouldn't. They would be object nihilists and rank determinists, and therefore they would be motivated to do little, if anything, and then they would be hellbound. But they're not. They're not like that for the most part. Most Christians I've run into are, for the most part, charitable and kind and nonviolent. Hopefully that won't change. It might. I think they're naive. I think their doctrine is flawed. I think they would be more effective if they spent a little bit more time examining their metaphysics and throwing out the contradictions and replacing blind faith with truth and actual faith, which is just, believing without seeing is not blind faith. Believing without seeing is simply believing in something because it's rational, not because you can see it before your very eyes. Why do we believe that Lazarus was raised from the dead? Why do we believe that Christ rose from the dead? We don't see people rising from the dead, but we understand there's no inherent rational contradiction there. The idea that someone rising from the dead, the idea of Christ being resurrected, the idea of the perpetuity of the soul, the permanence of one's soul, oneself. There's nothing inherently irrational about that. Irrational. There's nothing contradictory about that. You believe it. You may not see it, but you believe it. So that's just an example. You can't see 2 + 2 is 4 in the abstract, but you believe it. I mean, you can see 2 + 2 is 4 when it's applied to an object, but you also understand that the concept is correct. I don't need to show you 2 + 2 is 4 in any specific physical iteration for you to believe it. In fact, if you never saw it, conceptually speaking, 2 + 2 is 4 is entirely a rational concept, and therefore it is true. So anyway, I don't want to go down that rabbit trail, but the point being is I don't even know where the heck I was going with that. Oh, so forgive me. Anyway. All right, so I'm going to get us back on track. Sometimes I go down these rabbit trails and I get to this dead end and I forget where I was going, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'll just turn around. All right, so at any rate, I wanted to apologize if I don't remember if I did this yet or not, but I wanted to apologize. The last audio upload I did a couple things. One is I got a little too hyperactive. I was bringing the energy, but I should probably have split the difference. So sorry if I was a little, as the kids say, spurgy, which is a fun word. And I used the word fulcrum wrong, and I apologize for that. I uploaded that video, and I was like, I think I used the word fulcrum wrong. I don't think the end of a pendulum is hooked to a fulcrum. I mean, it doesn't matter. You guys, the handful of you that listen, are smart enough to understand what I meant. But the technical term was pivot. At the end of a pendulum is a pivot. So, like a swing or a pendulum, it's connected to a pivot, not a fulcrum. A fulcrum is for a lever. And I was pretty sure I was wrong, and I looked it up, and unfortunately, to my chagrin, I was wrong. And I was like, yeah, that's just the wrong word. But whatever. You know what I meant, so I'm going to leave it. Now, before we get started, I just want to... I thought I'd make a little bit of a commentary on the election real quick. Now, I don't really give a shit about elections because it's a uniparty, and the Democrats, the Republicans, they're the same side. They're two sides of the same coin. It doesn't even matter if they know it or not. There is a singular nature to government, and government is always going to go the way it's going. Doesn't matter who you elect. Look at the trend. The trend of the United States is to go from relative freedom to object tyranny. That trajectory has never really been thwarted to any serious degree, and it won't. As I've said before, the metaphysical premise will find its conclusion. The metaphysical premise of government, if left to itself, is going to find totalitarianism is the inevitable conclusion of any government of any kind anywhere in the world. The metaphysical premises which underwrite government imply totalitarianism. If left unfettered, now, they're often not left unfettered. Governments often collapse before there's outright totalitarianism. Some don't. Some jump right into totalitarianism. Some, it's a long, slow burn over the course of 10 generations or so, which is what we're seeing in the United States. But totalitarianism, where government is everyone and everything, is the inevitable conclusion of the collectivist metaphysics which underwrite the state. The collective ideal must be manifest in everything and in everyone. The collective ideal, the group identity, from which government gets its reason for being, must absorb all of reality to itself. Collectivist metaphysics are totalitarianism when worked out to their inevitable conclusion. Totalitarianism runs contrary to human nature, which is why it brings death and collapse. Because collectivist metaphysics are false and individualist metaphysics are true. Governments are collectivist metaphysics, which means governments result in totalitarianism and chaos, death, and collapse. So it doesn't matter who we have in charge. The trajectory is the same, like I said before. The idea of the government not becoming totalitarianism, or at least collapsing at some point before that, but it'll either become totalitarianism or it'll collapse, or it'll go through some kind of a weird revolution and change in some major fashion, some significant fashion. But no government lasts because collectivist premises have a lifespan. Like I said before, if you try to make a square circle, give you a piece of wood, you try to make a square circle, inevitably, you're never going to make the square circle. You'll go bankrupt and crazy, and your workshop and your life will become chaotic because you cannot make a square circle table. So there's a lifespan. So the idea that somehow the metaphysical conclusion is not going to lead to its inevitable outcome is the same thing as the apple falling off the tree, somehow stopping in midair and levitating its way back up to the branch. It's not going to happen. You can elect 1,000 Trumps. It's never going to happen. You can elect 1,000 Bidens or whoever you want. You can elect 1,000 RFKs. Not going to happen. Doesn't matter who. Soon as the politician becomes a function of the state, he will act according to the metaphysical premises which underwrite the state, which means he will, regardless of his best intentions, do nothing but promote the inevitable conclusion of the collectivist metaphysics which underwrite the state, which is totalitarianism and chaos and collapse. So, I don't get into elections. I don't really give a shit. There are 3 classes or 3 groups of people at work here in the West, and this is not a dog whistle. I am not an anti-Semite, so when I say, you'll know what I mean. You have three groups of people. You have the people who own the farms, you have the people who are the farmers, and you have the livestock and the cattle. The livestock and the cattle are you and me. We are cattle. We are livestock. We exist for mutton and wool and steak. That's what we're here for. We are the livestock. The farmers are your politicians. That's who you're voting for. That's who the cattle is voting for. The cattle is going to vote for the farmer. That's what we have. That's what we have. These are our free elections. We tell the cattle, we tell the livestock that they can vote for the farmer. We tell the slave they can vote for their master. And we think this makes sense. We say the people vote for their leaders, right? The people vote for their government leaders. That sounds good. That sounds fair, right? What it really means is the livestock votes for the farmer or the slave votes for the master. Because this is what the collectivist metaphysics say. There is no free people under the auspices of a ruling class which coerces the masses into, quote, right thinking and behavior as a function of law. Legal ethics do not allow for individual choice, by definition. Without individual choice, your will is subordinate to the law. There is no free choice. Your choice is a function. Your choice goes only as far as the law allows. Your choice is enslaved to the law. And they are the enforcers of the law. Your choice, as a function of your individual consciousness, is subordinate to the law, which is subordinate to the authority. So you as an individual are nothing. You are livestock. You are cattle. You and me, that's me. Then you have the farmers, which are your politicians. And then you have the people who own the farms. And what I said before about anti-Semitism is I am not saying that the people own this is not some kind of anti-Semitic dog whistle. It doesn't matter. I'm saying only what I'm saying. You have the cattle and the livestock, which is you and me. You have the politicians, and you have those who own the farms. You have the cattle, the farmer, and those who own the farms. That's all you have. I'm not saying who owns what or who is what. I'm not saying that at all. I think the idea that you are going to say that one group of people is this and one group of people is that one, I think that's entirely irrational. And even if it were true, which I'm not saying it is, but even if it were, it wouldn't matter because the real problem is the metaphysics. The reason why America is going through what it's going through, and the reason why all governments go through their trauma, all societies which exist under the auspices of government go through their trauma, their rise and fall, their collapse, has everything to do with the metaphysics. Not who or what or this group of people or that group of people, no. It has everything to do with the metaphysics, which underwrite the state. Doesn't matter who is in that state, doesn't matter who's doing what. The metaphysics, the philosophy, are why. Okay? So, I want to be careful. I am an individualist. I do not collectivize people. So, and I understand that when you are doing research and looking into groups like the far right and the dissident right, I know the terms for their anti-Semitic dog whistles. And I know one is the owners of government. So I need to be careful and point out that I am not using that in a far right dog whistle sense. I don't believe that. I am an individualist and a voluntarist. I do not collectivize people. I do not collectivize them according to identity, race, class, religion, gender, that kind of thing, blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm saying. So, but my point is I don't care about elections. This is what you have. You have the cattle and the livestock, that's me and you. Then you have the unless you're in one of the other two groups. Then you have the farmers, and then you have the people who own the farms. That's it. And this cycle and this process will continue until it doesn't anymore. So it doesn't really matter. The idea that somehow Trump's going to fix anything is laughable. The idea that Biden's going to fix anything is laughable. It's a sideshow. It's a distraction. I get it. It's hope over reason. Look, I get it. I'm not an animal. I understand things are bad. People desperately want to hope that they can get somebody in power who's going to make things better. I get it. I'm not trying to throw water on I'm not trying to throw a bucket of cold water on people. I'm not here to let everybody down. I'm just saying that if you understand that the problem is the metaphysical assumptions which are finding their conclusion, then you understand that your hope is ill-placed in the next election, and you understand that that's just not how it works. Again, the idea that you're going to elect Trump and fix everything is the idea that the apple is going to stop in midair and levitate back up on the branch. It's not. And I only say this to people because if you understand what's going on and you understand the context in which you find yourself, then you understand where to focus your time and emotional energy. You can focus your time and energy in more productive areas, like being more local, like developing relationships with your local community, like doing things to put yourself as far away from the nucleus of the system as you can, so that you could survive perhaps the coming collapse. Like, I know we can't all run to the woods and start our own little, our own little utopian societies, as it were. I mean, we have too much. We're plugged in. It's not possible for me. It's probably not possible for you. But what we can do is we can focus our time and energy and attention away from sideshows and distractions like the election, and focus them on things of more use, like learning the truth, like homeschooling our kids, like getting out of debt, like not being psychologically or even physically dependent on technology to whatever degree we can. So that's what I'm trying to do. If you understand the problem, you understand where things are going, you can start to develop a solution, developing local connections in a local community of people who can help each other out. We are even, I'm at the point now where we might actually consider going back to a church. I have to find an Armenian. I can't go to a Calvinist church, but some kind of a local church that's at least, I know the doctrine. I won't be as close to the doctrine as I can be, but at least I might find a doctrine that I can stomach, that it isn't as offensive to me. And there are certain denominations which I feel like I've been to, and I feel like aren't this sort of Neoplatonist collectivist juggernaut. Like a Calvinist church would be out of the question, Baptist and New Age churches and that kind of thing. But there are other denominations that are more Arminian or a little less, you're a worm and God controls all things and you're nothing and it's not about you at all and you're useless and helpless and worthless. There are churches that have a different message to that. But just in order to develop some sort of local community, we've started thinking that maybe it might not be a bad idea to get plugged into some church in some sense. So that's what I mean by bringing this to your attention, is not to vex people and to make them upset. And I'm not a nihilist, not even a little. In fact, at all. I reject nihilism entirely. I am a Christian and I believe in God. My metaphysics just aren't the doctrinal metaphysics you're probably used to. But I'm not a nihilist at all. There's many things you can do, but if you're focusing all your time and attention on things like the election, then it's a waste of energy. And psychologically, it will drain you. You'll get worked up about something that just doesn't matter. I'm not saying don't vote. You can vote. I'm saying that understand it's not going to really do anything. At best, it might postpone the inevitable conclusion, but at this point, I don't even think it's going to do that. I mean, America's so far gone that the idea that any politician, even if Christ himself were to come down, couldn't fix what's going on in this nation, without the power of the Almighty to just kind of just eradicate everything and build it up again. You know what I'm saying? But you can get the most virtuous, responsible, smartest person in the world. They're not fixing this. The United States has no border. We don't exist as a country. There's no border. There's no such thing as being an American citizen. It means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. Being a citizen doesn't mean anything. You have to understand that you have no border, and people come in, and immediately they're considered to be citizens, quote unquote. So in other words, citizenship means nothing. So, of course, the question I have is, what do we need government for? There's no such thing as being a citizen, in which case, well, who is actually the government in charge of, if not the citizens? So anyway, my point is we don't have a border. Citizenship means nothing. We are essentially, what would you call us? What would you call the United States? Not a country. It's a country has a border. There's no border here. We are, we're what? We're an idea. We're some kind of ethereal identity. I don't even know what. But that's what I'm saying. There's no cultural identity. There's no political identity anymore. So the idea that Trump's going to fix anything, fix what? Who's Trump? Trump's president of what? There's no country. There's no border. He's not president of the United States. There is no United States. There's no border. It doesn't exist. There's no plumb line for being a citizen. Somebody in the Solomon Islands, and I'm not pointing at Solomon, I'm just trying to think of a place far away. Someone in the Solomon Islands is as much a citizen of the United States as I am, as long as they can get here, and walk across the Texas-Mexico border. I mean, functionally, they're as much of a citizen as me. There's no difference. The only difference is that they might happen to be in the Solomon Islands right now, but if they can get here and then not leave, they're citizens. I mean, I think there's even pushes to get to get undocumented people to be able to vote, which means anybody in the world can vote. As long as you can get here, you can vote. So yeah, I mean, Trump's not fixing anything, and so this leads me to my point. My point is that we get so worked up over these elections. It's like an existential crisis in the United States. I mean, and you can be anywhere in the world. Just go on, fortunately or unfortunately for the rest of the world, our politics are basically in everybody's face, which I think is an abomination. But anyway, the fact of the matter is you can see, no matter where you are in the world, you could see how apoplectic people get around here. It's an existential crisis over here. It's absolutely an existential crisis. People are fit to be tied. And I'm like, why is this? I thought that as an American citizen, I thought there were certain things that we didn't have to worry about. I thought there were certain rights. There were certain non-starters. That I thought the idea was that the thing that made being America so great and so free was it didn't matter who was king, quote unquote, as it were. It didn't really matter who you elected. There were certain powers. There were certain things that people in positions of that politicians couldn't do, that people in political positions couldn't do. Like, for example, it doesn't matter who's elected or not, you still had a border. The government couldn't just arbitrarily shut the border down or open the border, that you actually had, geopolitical lines that designated that this is your country. So, whoever came into power couldn't change that. Whoever was in power couldn't rob you of your individual right to life, liberty, and property. The government couldn't marginalize certain groups of people and declare them unwashed and unwanted and pariahs and a problem. That each person was an individual before the law. that the government couldn't arbitrarily come in and take your stuff, take your money, take your earnings. Like, there was very little, in my understanding, for the average citizen to get worried about come election time, because there was so little that the politicians had, there was so little power the politician had over the most important parts of your life. Your right to self-defense, your right to free speech, the right to your own property, the right to have a border. Clearly, there would be no reason to get so worked up and so terrified, as though in an existential crisis, every time there was a presidential election around the corner. I thought the whole point, we want to say Trump is like the mustache man. Trump is like the next German mustache man. If he's going to get into power, he's never going to leave. It's going to be the Fourth Reich. I thought the whole point of America was that couldn't happen because we had checks and balances. We had certain inalienable rights that politicians couldn't violate. So no matter how psychotic and narcissistic and vilest and collectivist and evil and dictatorial the politician was, they couldn't really take that anywhere. I thought that was the whole point. I thought that's why being America was so great. I thought that's why our freedoms were guaranteed for now and 1,000 years to come. Well, clearly that's not the case. Clearly, take a look around, all of your rights, your very existence, your very ability to be safe and free is in the hands of the person who has political power in America. And that is why we all get worked up come election time, because we understand that all that other stuff, it's words. It's ink on paper. It means nothing. The real authority in government is power. And power is visceral. And power emanates from a person. So we understand it's very important who is and isn't elected. Of course, it's not important because it's all in the premise. But, I'm saying we understand as a people that there's no guarantee to life, liberty, property, freedom, pursuit. We know that's all lip service. That hasn't been true. Well, it hasn't been true for the past, 30 years, 50 years? If it was ever true. We understand it's all about who gets elected. We understand that if we elect the wrong person, we could be screwed to the wall. And that's why there's this feeling of object fear, and it's an existential crisis, because we know that's all words on all that other stuff it's words, it's noise, it's mouth noises, it's ink on paper, it's nothing, it's meaningless. Power is in the hands of the person who occupies the office, period. That's the way it is. That's the way it always was. And that's why elections are so, quote unquote, important. And I just wanted to say that. I want to say that as like, look, I understood, and this was years ago, I started to understand that this was all a lie, because if it wasn't, we wouldn't get so worked up. We wouldn't care. Most of us would be like, why even fucking vote? What's the point? I mean, okay, I guess this guy's a better steward. He manages, I don't know. What is a politician supposed to be in a free society where you have guaranteed life, liberty, and property that no one can take away, and an objective border, a border which is inviolable? What is a politician supposed to do? We're hiring managers, right? This guy maybe is a little bit better manager. Maybe this guy's puts on a little bit better face. Maybe this guy's better looking on television. Maybe this guy makes us look better on the world stage. But honestly, who really cares? I'm free. It's not like government can come take my money away whenever it wants. It's like government can't come take my, ability to defend myself. It's not like government can come in and, just arbitrarily open the borders to the world and flood my country with, flood the country. I don't say my country. Flood the country with, millions of undocumented peoples, and then, declare them able to vote. It's not like they can do that. So why do I care? Who gets elected? It shouldn't make any difference. My money's secure. My life is secure. I can still trust the police are going to protect me. I'm going to have a safe, because the way the government, because the way society's set up, and the things that we believe in our Constitution, X, Y, and Z, I'm always going to have a safe community, relatively speaking. We're going to have a fair justice system. It's going to keep us safe. Our borders are secure. My money is secure. Why should I even vote? Is it like that? No, of course it's not like that. Of course it isn't like that. It was never going to be like that. And so this ought to tell you right now that all this stuff, America free and Constitution and Bill of Rights, all this, the fact that we get so worked up around election time ought to tell you there's nothing free about this place. It's all about who gets in power, or so we think. And it's all a big psyop. I'm not even saying it's being done on purpose. It's probably not being done on purpose. I'm just saying that government is rooted in certain metaphysics, collectivist metaphysics, that are going to end up in totalitarianism and chaos and collapse inevitably. And if it doesn't get all the way there, there will be some kind of black swan event that'll send it all crashing down before that happens. But nothing good will come out of this. There's no some kind of magical get out of jail free card for America. There's no white knight. Jesus is not coming to save us. Trump is not the next Caesar, which is going to fix everything. It's going to usher in 1,000 years of peace. No, it's not. So that's the kind of point I'm trying to make here in this series. So look at that. Another 40 minutes has passed, and I did not get to my article. Oh, well, I guess that's that. I'm going to wrap it up here. I will try to promise that next time I will continue with this article. I have it here in my hands, all 9 pages of it. It's ready to go. I'm ready to read. I've done the work. I don't just get on here and talk. Go to my blog, unreformingtheology.com, where I talk a lot about stuff, not just theology or unreformed theology, lots of stuff. I have tons, hundreds and hundreds of articles. I've sat down and done the work. I've thought. This is not just me ranting my opinion. I have the work to prove that I'm prepared. But part of these videos is that I wanted to read through my articles and then add some stuff. And it just so happens that what I'm adding ends up being the whole video. So I guess I will pick up next time with my article, which again I have right here in my hand, and we will get through this and then move on. So having said that, hope you guys have a great day, and thanks to whoever happens to be listening. I appreciate it. Hope you're well. We'll look forward to talking at you next time, and take care. Bye.